American soccer fans, welcome to episode 181 of the USA Soccer Cast. We're bringing you everything about the U.S. national teams, the players, the leagues, everything else that impacts the game of soccer in these United States. I'm Donald Wine. The United States women's national team have a big window coming up starting this weekend and over the course of the next week with 3 matches against Japan. We're going to have some sound from Emma Hayes on the roster. We have the roster for you. We're going to go through that. We're going to go through what this team needs to do in this window, what we're going to be seeing, and also some stuff on the other side of the break about Japan and what they bring to the table and some of the turmoil that they are entering this series with. But first, let's talk about the U.S. women's national team roster. 26 players make this roster. They have convened already. As I said, 3 matches against Japan, the first coming this Saturday in San Jose. They then travel to Seattle on the 14th, on Tuesday, and then they finish the window up in Denver at Dick's Sporting Goods Park next Friday. So let's get into the women's national team roster. 3 goalkeepers, Jane Campbell, Claudia Dickey, and Fallon Tullis-Joyce. You have 9 defenders, Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, Naomi Girma, Avery Patterson, Lily Reel, Emily Sams, Emily Sonnet, Giselle Thompson, and Kennedy Wesley. 7 midfielders on this roster, Sam Coffey, Lindsay Heaps, Claire Hutton, Rose Lavelle, Olivia Moultrie, Jaden Shaw, and Lily Ioannis. And then finally, 7 forwards, Michelle Cooper, Jamise Joyce, Trinity Rodman, Emma Sears, Allie Sentner, Alyssa Thompson, and Sophia Wilson. The big story on this roster is that last name that I mentioned, the return of Sophia Wilson. We finally have 2 shots of espresso on the team. Mal Swanson is back at training with Chicago Stars. She is not on this roster, but it feels like very, very soon we will have all 3 shots of triple espresso back on the roster. But Sophia Wilson has not been on the team since October of 2024. She's back on the roster. She returned to action last month following maternity leave. Tierna Davidson also makes a return to the roster after missing all of last year with a torn ACL, and both are welcome sights for women's national team fans and head coach Emma Hayes. For the second time in a row, every player on this roster has been capped. And the one thing that Emma Hayes has wanted in this 3-match series is for everyone to get some experience against a Japan team that is fresh off of winning the Asian Cup last month. They outscored their opponents 29-1 throughout that tournament. They beat Australia in the final in Sydney to claim that title. And they're ranked 5th in the world. But Emma Hayes has talked about, first of all, scheduling Japan for 3 matches. She mentioned in the press conference that she had last week when introducing the roster that it's hard to get that other team to come in for just 1 game. And so she figured it was a great opportunity to line up a top 5 opponent for 3 matches in a row. And I got to ask her about how the squad's going to rotate between these 3 games. Obviously, she wants to keep everybody fresh. She wants to be able to evaluate all these players, all 26 of them. And right now, there's a rule that was introduced, I think, last month. We saw it for the first time on the men's side when they played Belgium and Portugal, that during friendlies, teams can have up to 8 subs. But if both teams agree beforehand, they can do up to 11 subs in a match. And I asked her if this was something that they planned on doing for these games or if she was going to go a different route. Listen to what Emma Hayes had to say about that.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, Emma. Great to see you. Following up on that question, a couple of weeks ago, I believe, they changed the rule to allow 8 subs during friendlies, and teams can agree on having up to 11 subs, as what we saw during the men's window. Is that something that has been agreed to between you and Japan, and how does that affect their squad rotation you were just talking about?
You know what? I have no awareness that certainly hasn't been preempted from my end in terms of shifting from 8 to 11. And personally, I'm not interested in that here. I would be more interested if that was January in a pre-season. But as you know, especially once you make more than 5 changes, sometimes it can be highly disruptive to make more. I would have a greater preference to play one group for 60, 70 minutes, make the changes then, and then play another group for 60, 70 minutes, which is which is what I plan on doing. Um, and I've said this so many times. That's the great thing about playing 3 games. If we only played, say, 2 games in this window, I probably would consider utilizing more, up to 8. And I'm not saying I won't, but because we have 3 games, I feel like the whole squad gets developed. And not every country play 3 games windows. So I want to make sure I utilize it to our advantage as much as possible.
Okay, so interesting enough, they're not going to do 11 subs, and it seems like that's not something that she wants to do. And she has mentioned that she is basically splitting this team into 2 different lineups, 2 different groups. One lineup will play 60 minutes in the first game, the other lineup will play 60 minutes in the second game, and then one of those lineups will once again suit up for 60 minutes in the third game. She may not even use all 8 subs, but she wants just about everybody on this roster to get a chance to play against Japan. And I think that's a really good thing because what she's been trying to do over the last year since the Olympics, basically almost 2 years to this point, is introduce a bunch of players to this national team, strengthen the player pool, give a lot of players some skin in the game, so to speak, to try and build up as a unit. But also, she gets a chance to evaluate all of these players, and she's incorporated the U23s into that. They have a similar camp where they're getting experience, and so it's cool that they get to have this opportunity, and this is a great way to kind of see how these players play against the same opponent. It's one thing if you're one team plays well against a good opponent and one team plays well against a lesser opponent, but having the same opponent 3 times means everyone gets kind of the same evaluation against the same squad. And I think that is something that we haven't done a lot on the women's side. We've usually have these windows where you have 2 and 1 if it's 3 matches, 2 teams, or 2 games against one team, and then a second team comes in. We rarely have it where, unless it's She Believes, 3 matches in a week against 3 different teams. That's just not how women's teams around the world really operate for the most part. But I do like that they have this opportunity with Japan. Another thing is kind of the back line. And obviously, with the return of Tierna Davidson, that introduces the element, but there's really only one like natural left back on this team. And so my friend Silves from Shea Butter FC, she asked a question about the back line and what she hopes, what Emma Hayes hopes to get out of this group. And so here's what Emma had to say about the back line and the fact that there's only really one natural left back on this roster.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for your time. I wanted to touch a bit on the defense. Obviously, a strong unit, but a really big standout is that there's only one sort of natural left back. What are your sort of expectations with the defenders that you've called in terms of filling that position over 3 games?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, while there's one naturally left-footed player, I think Avery Patterson showed her qualities against Colombia. I think she showed that she go toe to toe with the best defensively. She can get up and support the attack. She has got a left foot and can put a ball into areas. She can invert, and from those areas, I think be really good and dominant. Good aerially again. I know this sounds silly, but she's got a good throw in. Sometimes so many fullbacks really struggle with that, but she's exceptional at it. I think the same with Giselle. I think Giselle demonstrated against Canada. She too could play left back. Both of those players, I think, really stood out at She Believes. And I think both of them have started the season strong. And it's merit-based, but also, when you are in the environment, you have to shine. And they have. And for that reason, I think in Giselle and Avery, we've got 2 players who, at this moment in time, sit behind Lily Real and Emily Fox. But I think there's going to be a real fight and great competition in those areas.
And my thanks to Sills for asking that question because I think it's a fascinating one. It's one we get a lot on the men's side, but it's not something we get on the women's side that often. It's more about you kind of see the vision when you see this roster sometimes. And with the defenders, that was a big question mark. How she wants to rotate, how she wants to play these players. And So this is the stuff we want to find out from Emma Hayes and what she's thinking about, what she's evaluating. It may not necessarily be about formation changes, but it's about combinations and who works well with each other. As we look towards this fall with the CONCACAF W Championship, which is Olympic qualifying, which is World Cup qualifying, we want to know what combinations she's got. She wants to know what combinations she's got. And with all these players being evaluated, at a certain point, you got to start honing in on what you think is going to work and then tinkering with these formations, tinkering with these lineups somewhat till you get what you think is your best 11, barring any injuries. But introducing Tierna into this mix at center back, Naomi Girma obviously is in camp. She is the the main linchpin in this defense. What happens with an Emily Sams or a Lily Reel or even an Emily Sonnet, Giselle Thompson? How do you deploy her where she's effective on the flank and very dangerous? Kennedy Wesley, how do you incorporate her into the mix? I think there's a lot of questions about the combinations that Emma Hayes can have, and I'm really curious to see how that works out. I think the first lineup that we see against Japan, I don't know if you consider that her strongest one, but at least for me, I'm going to assume it is. That it's her first choice at the moment. And we can see how that will work. The goalkeeping situation is going to be interesting between Fallon Tullis-Joyce and Claudia Dickey, and you have Jane Campbell back into the mix. So it'll be great to see what Emma Hayes is thinking at the goalkeeper spot. That's been the one really open competition that we've had over the past year or so since Alyssa Nair retired. There hasn't been a full-fledged declaration of who is the number one goalkeeper. So continuing to see how each of them play, 3 goalkeepers, hopefully each of them get a start in all 3 matches, and we can kind of evaluate them alongside each other. But of course, the most anticipated part of this is the return of Sophia Wilson to the lineup. Having Trinity Rodman, having Sophia both in the starting 11 together will be awesome to witness. And who do you pair them with out of this group? Do you put Sophia in the middle? Do you and bring Alyssa Thompson in? Do you have Ellie Sentnor in the middle and have Trinity and Sophia on the wings? This is, and the fact that they're all interchangeable is also a great thing. Trinity and Sophia have both played the 9. They've both played on either wing. They sometimes flow between each other during a game. And I think that's what creates havoc for opposing defenders. So I'm very curious to see how all of these combinations work up front. And then finally, we've talked about all the other groups. Let's talk about the midfield, because I think the midfield, you have kind of a interesting situation brewing, because in my mind, I think Sam Coffey, Claire Hutton, Lily Ioannis, Rose Lavelle are kind of your best 4 midfielders right now. And you can't necessarily play them all. I mean, I guess you could, but it's hard to play all 4 of them at the same time. Then you add Lindsay Heaps, who is the captain of this group, and you add that to the mix. You add a Jaden Shaw who can come off the bench. You add a Olivia Moultrie who can come off the bench. All of them also can start. So I'm curious to see what Emma Hayes will do with that midfield. How is she going to continue to solidify the defensive part of things, but also allow them to go forward in the attack and really be creative and dynamic? Rose is the most dynamic midfielder that we have, but she doesn't play all the time. And then also, I love Rose, but sometimes she is hampered due to nagging injuries, and you don't want to overexert her at this point in the season. So how do we, again, add some creativity to the mix if Rose is not on the field? If Sam Coffey is not there, who I think is honestly probably the best player that's been playing in the midfield group right now, her and Lily, can they pair together? Her and Claire, can they pair together? There's so many options here, and I think that's what's exciting about the women's national team, is that so many players have presented themselves as players that you think could be a starter if the Women's World Cup started tomorrow. And right now we have probably 25, 26 of those players that you think could go into the starting lineup and easily start a game. And that's not counting some of the players that are on this particular roster. So it's going to be fascinating to see what these lineups look like. I think we'll get maybe a more in-depth look at what Emma Hayes is thinking as far as who she thinks is her number one lineup right now at this point in time. So let's take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to talk about some of the turmoil that is facing Japan as they enter this window and talk a little bit more about what it's going to take to beat Japan in these 3 matches coming up. So stick around. Hey everyone, are you looking for the latest gear for your U.S. national teams, Major League Soccer, the NWSL, or any other team in the world of soccer? The USA Soccercast has affiliate partnerships that are ready to help you out. Head to linktree.com/USA Soccercast, where we have links to Homage, Fanatics, the MLS Store, and Breaking Team. You can get the jersey, shirt, hat, or accessory you're looking for to support your team, while also saving some money and helping this show in the process. Again, linktree.com/USA Soccercast. Click on the links and get your gear. And we thank you as always for your support of the show. We are back and we are discussing this upcoming April international window. The United States taking on Japan in 3 matches. Again, 1 in San Jose, 1 in Seattle, and 1 in Denver over the course of the next week. And I want to talk about Japan for a second because Japan is on fire. They just won the Women's Asian Cup. It's their 3rd win in 4 times for the Asian Cup. As I mentioned before, they outscored their opponents 29-1 during the tournament. The tournament took place in Australia, and in the final, they beat Australia in Sydney in Stadium Australia. That is not an easy thing to do. But they enter this tournament without an official head coach because just 12 days after winning the Asian Cup, Nils Nielsen resigned. And the Japan Football Association basically said that his contract had expired and that he had stepped down. They also named Miki Shikano as the interim for these friendlies. But it seems like, at least according to Agence France Presse, AFP, they're reporting that it was a little bit more than that. They're reporting that there was some turmoil behind the scenes that the Japan Football Association felt that his coaching style was a little bit too lax, a little bit too soft, that there were some culture clashes, there were some communication issues. And it's interesting because for the Nadeshiko, Nielsen was their first foreign head coach. Every other head coach had been Japanese. And it seems like they're going to go back to hiring a Japanese person to coach their team. And so I'm wondering if it was just them not thinking that this was going to work, but the results in the field, barring like maybe a couple of games last year, had been very good. And again, romping through the Asian Cup, destroying everybody in their path, including the hosts in the final. It was interesting to see that 12 days later, it was kind of a big blow up between the coach and the federation. And so how will that affect this team as they enter this match? Sure, they're going on the face. They're going to go out. They're going to be very, very sound technically. They're very dynamic, especially in the midfield. They have some players that will scare anybody. And again, they have been putting the biscuit in the basket, scoring 29 goals in the span of a few weeks. They are able to work teams to death, but also dynamically destroy them. And we saw last year in the She Believes Cup that this team can take us out. They're not scared of us. So will this turmoil kind of affect their preparation, their approach, and just also the team morale? Remains to be seen. I mean, obviously, we have to expect them to be professional and to come out and do their job and try to take out the United States. The United States are going to try to win these games. But this is a big, big story for women's soccer because Japan is one of the best teams in the world. And for them to kind of make a change at this point in time, they've already qualified for the Women's World Cup by winning the Asian Cup, but they still have Olympic qualifying to do. They still have all these other things they want to accomplish. And Now they have to spend some time to decide who their coach is going to be for all of this. If it's going to be Cano, who is on an interim basis throughout the next year, that's one thing. We've seen how that can work and how that cannot work. There's also them hiring someone else and then having to switch around a bunch of things before the Women's World Cup, including getting away from some of the things that got them to this point in the first place. It's fascinating for them, but for the United States, I think they need to go out and they need to really hone in on the details. Japan is great at beating teams on the details, and that's how, in my mind, they beat us last year in the She Believes Cup. They were, pressing, they were doing all these things, but they were taking attention to those little things that add up to goals. We were not paying attention to those things as well as they were. And I think with these different lineups, they all are going to have a chance to play a very, very tough team. And I want to see how they respond to that. This is where the part of the evaluation should be is who's hungry, who's ready to play, but also when it comes down to it, who can you trust? Who can you depend on when you're in a World Cup final against a team like Japan, against a team like Spain or England? Maybe not England, but against one of those teams in a big knockout match, who can you trust? Who can you know is going to show up, show out, perform their duties, pay attention to those details that can be the difference between moving on or going home. That's what this series is about. That's why it's so important for the United States to perform well and show in these players and to show that, hey, when the chips are down on the table, bet on me. I can get you there. That's what we're going to see over the next week in these three matches, and I'm really hoping that they're three exciting matches. Of course, I hope the U.S. wins them, but I think Japan is going to present a tremendous test for the United States women's national team. That will do it for episode 181 of the USA Soccer Cast. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on Blue Sky, Twitter, and YouTube. Follow us on all of those sites at USA Soccer Cast. Subscribe, rate, and review our shows. It helps us get in front of new people and is greatly appreciated. Tell your friends about us. Finally, head to linktree.com/USA Soccercast to check out our affiliate links and our stimulus store. We have everything you need to watch the beautiful game and follow your teams, and using those links also helps support the show. We'll talk to you again soon, y'all. Peace.